Hello, everyone. Good morning. Oops, happy Friday. There's Gigi. We missed you last week. I think you said you didn't get the notification. Um, yeah, I'm pre-scheduling them. I don't have any more scheduled after today, but that's only because Christmas is next week. Um, I forgot what I think I'm going to do it on Saturday morning next week just because I was going to skip the week and you'll have to check for the pre-scheduled ones, but I was thinking there are so many without their kids on Christmas, so I really don't want to skip the whole week. So we'll probably be back. I think I'm going to do it Saturday, but I'll post and let everyone know. But good morning, everyone. Let's see what is going on. I've got my questions ready. That's a great thing about pre-scheduling. I'm posting the questions so everybody knows what we're going to be talking about. I just got this book. Has anyone read it? Never Split the Difference? It's not about narcissism, but I have a beautiful mom in one of my groups, and she highly recommended that book. And so I ordered it. I'm excited to read it, but in terms of negotiating, and she said there are so many crossovers when it comes to this type of battle that we're all, well, many of you are in. I'm thankfully not, but I am still in it because I'm still walking this journey with so many of you. And I'm honored to do that. It's a journey I wouldn't wish on anyone, but if you have to do it, I'm glad we're all doing it together. Good morning, Jenny. So what have I been doing this week? I have my newsletter ready for, hopefully everybody signed up for my e-newsletters. Those go out every Monday morning. Yeah, it is like negotiating with a terrorist. Lemonade Wisdom, you can sign up for that on the One Mom's Battle website, and that goes out every Monday morning. I just finished the one for Monday. I do them a few days in advance. Or a hostage taker. Yes. It's interesting because one of the instructors for the high conflict divorce certification program is a ransom negotiator for kidnapping victims. And so his insight, he also works, he's overseas, David Armstrong, but he is brilliant in helping with these types of situations because it's very much along the lines of what I try to teach my clients, the importance of profiling the type of person that you are up against, because you have to know where their buttons are. There are times where in court, your attorney may want to push one of those buttons to get the mask to drop. But then there are buttons that you want to stay the heck away from. And so profiling, it is so easy for us to say, oh my gosh, they're all the same. We were married to the same person. Yes and no. That is the very, when you first start off on this journey and the light bulb moments start, popping, that is exactly how it feels. And I have been there. I remember coming across Carol McBride, Dr. McBride's article, Help, I'm Divorcing a Narcissist. And that was my first big light bulb moment. And I was like, oh my God, she wrote an article about my divorce. But once you are kind of a veteran of this type of journey, it's so critical to start breaking it down. Was your ex somebody who was bullied all through school? And I know that was very much my ex's reality. He was quiet and picked on and really nerdy and studious. And I do think a lot of that played into his wounds, who he is today. Obviously major family stuff, that was also involved. But, so knowing those things, Dr. Romney describes, the vulnerable narcissist and the very grandiose narcissist. Mine was very much in the vulnerable category. You have to keep in mind that it's like dealing with a 5-year-old child. They are emotionally stunted and truly unable to be anything but who they are and how they present. But you profiling them and knowing the intricacies of the narcissist or the sociopath that you are up against, best advice I could give anybody: start there, do a brain dump. Everything you've ever heard about them, know about them to be true. It's going to give you a lot of insight into your opponent, and knowing how to navigate this battle a little bit better from the strategy mindset. And I talked to a wonderful woman yesterday. It was my first time talking to her. And, it was that scenario where she had stayed for so long that she had been emotionally checked out for a long time. And so even though she is just newly fresh out of the gate, she was able to be in a strategy mindset where, there's people I talked to 2 years into it who are still guided by, the emotions, and trauma is at play in that. And it's hard because we have to get to that strategy mindset to be less triggered, to, it's a fascinating topic, and we all come with such different stories and backgrounds and life experiences that it's going to be different for everyone. I was probably about 2 years into my journey, looking like a deer in headlights before I started looking at it through the lens of strategy. And that a lot of that had to do with sitting in court and watching the attorneys and just the system as a whole, realizing I had been going about it the wrong way the entire time. And so it was at that point I made a huge shift. So I just went off on a big rant. Let me see some of the comments here. Yeah, kidnapping, ransom situation. Money and reputation are my ex's biggest buttons. Absolutely. That is for so many of them. If I'm talking to somebody who their ex is a local doctor in a small town, I tell them, your biggest leverage is that person's reputation. They don't, they're calling your bluff, they're playing games, but I can almost guarantee that person doesn't want to go into family court and have their dirty laundry aired for everyone in town to see. Those are important things to know about who you're up against. And finances, I have yet to find a narcissist who that isn't one of their big buttons, whether they are on the extreme wealth end of the spectrum or the poverty end of the spectrum. That financial button, they don't want a penny going to you. Everything is theirs. That is their mentality. That's what we're up against. So let's jump into the questions. Why do the courts claim to be ruling in the best interest, yet they aren't? And why does CPS protect the abuser? So that's a big topic. That in the best interest of the child, that is such archaic wording that has been stamped on everything in the courts. They've lost sight of that, obviously. There are still family court professionals who I do believe are child focused, but, my personal opinion, it's been the parental rights movements, whether, it's as much, as pro-dad as I am. Again, I was raised by my dad. I am very pro-child. I'm very pro-healthy parent. But I will go to bat every day of the week and say that the father's rights movement is one of the worst things to ever happen to family court. It creates a huge division. We are, outspent, outplayed. It's a very uneven playing field. 9 times out of 10, there is unequal access to finances. Um, a lot of, we know men fall more into the narcissism category. There are female narcissists, borderline, all of that, that, do contribute to some of the high conflict divorces. But, statistically speaking, more men fall into that category. And it is those individuals thrive in the family court system where we flail. It's not a natural environment for us. Most of us are very conflict avoidant, especially in situations where there is domestic violence. There's years of trauma, emotional abuse, psychological abuse. No, I don't have a black eye to show or a, busted lip, but I guarantee you my wounds are very deep and, do cause me problems when it comes to the family court system. It is, so I think a lot of those things play into, making it about parental rights versus a child's best interest. Um, a parent's right does seem to trump a child's best interest, and that's really unfortunate. And then I talk about it a lot. You've got everything from complete corruption when it comes to those operating behind the bench, all the way to, individuals who maybe they started out with the best of intentions, but they're calloused to it. They're just over it. These are a bunch of case numbers, and I can understand how that would wear on a person day in and day out. I could not do their job. You see the worst side of humanity. And I do think that your scale of abuse becomes very skewed when you are seeing absolute horrors. I have witnessed things or heard things in family court that I would never repeat because they are that horrific. Child abuse situations. And we are in, a world with a lot of evil. When you are seeing that day in and day out, and then someone comes to you and, gosh, this person's being controlling, they're doing this and that and the other, you kind of, like, I know for myself, I check myself every day. Every story is equally important, no matter what a child is going through, whether it's emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, it's all abuse. But that is a conscious decision that I make every day with the stories I hear because I know what happens behind the bench. And I do have compassion for the judges who are good people, who, aren't in the corrupt scale. I couldn't do what they do. So I think there's a whole variety of reasons why the courts aren't acting in the best interest of the child. And I'm not making excuses for them. It is one of my biggest missions is to, we need to have accountability in the family court system. Every court should be video recorded, audio recorded. It should be accessible to the public at all times because what is going on behind closed doors is horrific, and I used to live, I call it my fake fancy life in my gated community with my nice cars and my, cute little kids and, fake facade life that I lived with the narcissist, orchestrated by him. And I became a puppet in that, I had no idea what was going on in the family court system until I experienced it myself. And people, until they've lived it, they just don't get it. It's kind of like, when you find a mental health professional who really gets it, it's because they have personally experienced a narcissist in some capacity of their life. A mom, a dad, a sibling, a relationship, a boss. But until you have that experience, they aren't trained in the reality of cluster B. They're given a very textbook. The DSM is a joke, in a lot of ways. It's very textbook. It's not accurate. It doesn't represent the interpersonal relationships, how their partners are injured and wounded and affected, and their children. We could do so much better. So that's my next soapbox. Let's see. I'm kind of reading the comments here. Yeah, abuse is abuse. Absolutely. Oh, and the second part of that question, why does CPS protect the abuser? I am not a fan of CPS. It is worse than family court. It is probably the most corrupt organization that exists anywhere in the US. So, they are so all over the place. You might find one good one out of 100 workers. And I know we have CPS workers who follow my work. I apologize. I'm thankful that you are that one person out of 100. But overall, it is they get their money from certain areas for certain areas of work that they do, and it's not family court cases. They get a family court case, their goal is to open and close that as quickly as possible, and a lot of the time the tables flip, and you, the reporting party worried about your children, are now under investigation. I've had 3 personal experiences with CPS, and I have nothing nice to say about that agency. And in fact, they've traumatized my children. It's a joke. And so, but I know, if you have a pediatrician who is witnessing the abuse, or another reporting party, a teacher, a therapist, their first go-to is, let's call CPS. And I get that. And I do think it's necessary for a paper trail to back up, what you're saying to build your case. But I don't think of it as anything more than a paper trail. I have zero hope in the CPS system. You can quote me on that. So the next question, X avoided trial the first time, and now we are facing another in which I may need to go pro se. Any tips? So I always like to remind people I am not, and my cup has a bad word on it, so I'm going to hide it so I don't get banned from YouTube or whatever. I always like to remind people I am not an attorney. I'm not qualified to give legal advice. Always consult with your attorney first. Also, the comments, we have some amazing, brilliant people who show up here every week, and they are a wealth of information. So, also look at the comments in the sections, but yeah, bad words. But it's got a unicorn, so it's cute. Okay, trial in pro se. I did a 2-day trial back in 2011, and for those of you who follow my story, I could not afford an attorney. My ex-husband could, so I was in pro se during our trial. It was a very intimidating process. I was very new to everything, and I really didn't know what I was doing. What I found to be invaluable was consulting with an attorney behind the scenes. So there was a local attorney, he's still here, he's retired now, practicing in my town, and I called every attorney desperate, asking for their help. And this kind man and his wife, who was his paralegal, responded to me. I came in for a consultation, and they probably felt so sorry for me that he offered to help me for free. And just behind the scenes, to know how to present, how to properly submit exhibits in as evidence, because hearings and, all of those things, we call them requests for orders, RFOs. It is a whole nother ball game. Trial, there are formalities to it. You need My advice would be to get somebody in the background, even if it's a paralegal who is very skilled, who can help you prepare and label your exhibits and get everything together. Choose your battles wisely. That is my advice, whether it's a hearing, a trial. I see so many people get caught up in the little details. For me, it was about clearing those as much as possible, and giving my judge the opportunity to focus on the big things. But if you're, it sounds like you're already working with an attorney, I would see if that attorney would be willing to stay on in the background, and if that attorney is not the right fit for you, find someone who will. um, a lot of community centers, domestic violence shelters, they do have attorneys you can consult with, limited scope. So look into things like that as well. I just saw a question that I actually think sometimes they catch my eye. Not that all of your questions aren't important. Why don't therapists want to testify? I think that's a really good topic. And I will tell you, when I first started the battle, you believe that therapists, you hear what's happening, you're talking to my kids, like, don't you want to be a fierce advocate just like me and run in there and save them? Unfortunately, it's not the reality. And what I've seen happen a lot of times is when the therapist does come in and testify, it's a breach of confidentiality. I believe that's what they cite. If the opposing party doesn't want that therapist talking to your kids anymore, they can motion to have that therapist removed from the case because they breached confidentiality in the courtroom. I could be wrong on that with the details and the specifics, but I've seen things like that happen in several cases with my clients. It's probably different in every area. My mentality with my kids' therapist, they don't, a lot of people get into that realm of work because of their own histories, their own baggage. That there, a lot of the therapists I know have high anxiety. It's just like for us, it's not a positive environment for them. There's a lot of anxiety that comes into play. I remember my own therapist years ago said, do not put me on the stand, Tina. Like, I don't do well. I don't like being ripped apart by opposing counsel, those types of things. My mentality with therapists for my kids was, I just want someone to help my kids fill their toolbox. I want my kids to be equipped, because whether it's their other parent or a boss in the future or a teacher in ninth grade or a toxic friend, they are going to encounter toxic people. And so I shifted my mentality pretty early on, and I did not want to use my therapist, my daughter's therapist, in that capacity. The reality is they are going to be ripped apart by opposing counsel. They're going to be accused of being biased. It's I get kind of sometimes why they don't want to, but I think it's different. It's Gigi says therapists are not trained to be court witnesses. Absolutely. They got into the work they do for a specific purpose. There are, psychologists, forensic psychologists who that is their job. They testify as expert witnesses. It is just another day in the life for them. But, a play therapist, a child's therapist, it's just, I personally would not ask one to, get on the stand. I've never done that to date, and I wouldn't. I found that my daughter's therapist was willing and open to talking to minors counsel. My minors counsel was incredibly narcissistic himself, and not a good person. So but he did relay the information to the court. And so it kind of came in a roundabout way. My own therapist talked to my custody evaluator on my second evaluation and had a huge impact. So, it's a matter of getting it in the right way that allows them to stay in their own comfort zone but still be your advocate. And it's always different how that plays out. Um, yeah, Erica says, I think my kid's therapist didn't want to testify because she didn't want us starting therapy with that in mind. She didn't want to be used, if that makes sense. Yes, that is another fantastic point, because so many, especially if you are, the high conflict individual, they go into the therapist and they're immediately game playing. They're trying to get them on their side. So many of these people are so charming, so charismatic that it works. And in those cases, believe me, you don't want the therapist on the stand. And so, I think looking at it from that lens is also really important. Yeah, and like Gigi said, there are a lot of therapists who actually make their living testifying on behalf of abusers, acting as the expert witness, pay to play. Absolutely. You've got that in this broken system as well. So, don't cross a therapist off your list. I think I would never start within the first year asking a therapist if they would be willing to testify. It's just not a direction I would personally go. Um, okay, next question. This is a big one, and this is one that comes up a lot with my coaching clients. My heater just kicked on. Hopefully it's not too loud. I thought I had turned it off. Are you allowed to record a child when they are venting or complaining about the narcissist? It is very frowned upon from what I see in the court system. There were times in the beginning of my battle where my kids would get in the car after parenting time with their biological human, and they would just be, upset and crying and detailed. So there were times that I had a recorder on before they even got in the car, because then no one could say I took it out of context. I coached them. It was literally, they've been gone for 3 days. You can hear the doors open, you can hear my ex-husband talking, and you can hear my kids get in and how things unfolded. I did record things like that. I never did anything with it because I know it's just really frowned upon. For your attorney, maybe, to have insight, if it's legal in your state, I should preface it. In some states you can't record someone. Maybe you can your own kids. I don't know the legalities of it, but I personally would not try to use that in court. I know people who have recorded abuse, used it in evaluations, and have been very successful in that. I know that at one point in my court case, I told the judge, I have the recording if you're interested in hearing it. And the judge kind of used that almost to back my ex into a corner, saying, I can have her hit play on that recording. Do you want to tell me what really happened? And that was fantastic. But in general, therapists, others in the court system do not like kids being recorded in situations like this. And so check with your attorney. But I just, for me, it's not a direction I would personally go, knowing what I know now about the system and how that type of thing can backfire. It's check with your attorney. Can you talk about the narcissist and COVID not following guidelines? This is a big topic, and I just wrote my weekly newsletter last week, went out on this topic. I've written a blog about it. I just did a YouTube video on it. I remember when COVID first hit in March, April, doing a YouTube video on it because I just knew it was going to be bad when it came to the narcissist. And you know, the way I've labeled it recently, it is their new weapon of abuse. If you are somebody who doesn't believe that we're in a pandemic and thinks it's all a big hoax, they are going to hunker down with your kids and isolate them just to poke you. If you are someone who is concerned about the pandemic, like I am, and taking my health and precautions very seriously, I've personally only been to the grocery store 3 times since March. Um, I can only imagine if my ex-husband were still in the picture. I just saw him on a news clip recently, being interviewed about one of his neighbors, and he had this like N95 mask on, and meanwhile his mom is interviewed and she's got hers like hanging down to here, and I'm just like, it gave me a glimpse into what my life would be like if he were still in the picture. And I guarantee you, be walking around with his N95 and hazmat suit, and my kids would be exposed. And I can guarantee you that's what would be happening because I have health issues. And, you know, he would truly sacrifice my kids to spite me as weapons. And so Glenn and I were just talking about it. And it's like, God, what would it have been like? You know, we would have probably had to quarantine half the house, and it would be an absolute nightmare. My heart is really with all of you who are dealing with this right now. For some of you, it truly is your life that is being put at risk. And, you know, once somebody in one of my state chapters said, you know, she's positive, and she said, you know, I feel like it is his weapon to kill me, and to anyone who isn't in this realm and doesn't understand what we're all up against, that sounds hysterical. That sounds dramatic. I meet her eye to eye. I know exactly that is her reality, and it is absolutely centered in truth. It is terrifying, and you know, and it the problem is that there are judges who don't seem to care about COVID at all. And then there are judges who are taking it seriously. And so it's flipping a coin. You know, what does your judge think? And that's where we see the courtroom bias come into play. You can't even hide it at this point. You've got rulings all over the place. But you know, when you are dealing with a narcissist, it's like playing the opposite game. Whatever you want, they're going to do the opposite. If you have a lot of energy on a topic, they're going to up the ante, and they're going to do the opposite. So, you know, it's important to Randy just shared an article. Um, I think you sent me that article, maybe Randy, a couple people have. Um, we've seen some insane things coming out of family court. I believe a mom lost custody because she had her child tested for COVID. Um, Aaron says it's like that quote, you think you can't control his behavior when you're married, try being divorced. Absolutely. That, you know, they have a vendetta against you, especially if they have abandonment issues, if you left the marriage or the relationship, if they have a public image. And I know that was a lot of it for my ex-husband, is this facade he created about our family. It's actually the e-newsletter I just wrote talks about this. So many people talk about the narcissist and holidays where they sabotage, they rage. I had the opposite. Mine showered me with gifts and cards. Sometimes I got 4 birthday cards in the same year with the most amazing words written. But what I would say to him is, I want to feel those words. When I read this, I don't feel loved. But his goal was to, you know, it was back when Facebook was just starting. his goal was to have me post on social media about all of these gifts I got, about this trip that we were going on, or brag to our friends when they were coming over for dinner on Friday night. It was all for show, but he went over the top on holidays. And that's where profiling the person again really comes in handy, because they are all, it's all about, we are talking about holidays, birthdays, Christmas, whatever holiday it is, it boils down to, for all of them, that it's not about them. And and I can imagine COVID has that, first of all, how do they get, when the news is all over this topic, they're kind of spinning just like they do with the holidays, where it's not about them and they have to get their feed source somewhere. It's hard when everyone's isolating, and that's why you see these guys, caravanning all around the country with the kids without masks and everything else. It's all tied into that, that same issue. So all right, everybody, I'm going to close off for today. I'm actually going to be doing a keynote speech in January. I'll announce more details about that virtually. But I have a Zoom call with the founders of this organization to talk more about what that looks like. So, stay safe out there. Take care. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to this every week. And yeah, oh, and Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Happy holidays. So much love for all of you. And if you don't have your children this year for your holiday, we're all in this together. The invisible string book. We are all connected. We are all cheering for you and wrapping you in love. So take care.